Okay, so the president did talk about having to have this news conference where he expresses remorse and sorrow for so many families now 14 times, and he's tired of doing it. A lot of presidential candidates are also expected to address the issue today on the campaign trail. Let's bring in Republican strategist Lisa Booth and Democratic strategist and CNN commentator Maria Cardona to talk about this. And Maria, I want to start with you. Good morning to both of you.
Good morning, Victor.
Maria, I want to start with you. I wonder, could any law that could be enacted have stopped what we saw in Charleston?
Well, Victor, I don't think we know the extent of the circumstances of what happened in Charleston. But I can tell you that if we are able to pass common sense gun safety legislation like the ones that we tried to pass a couple of years ago, that 90% of the American people support, which means a simple background check to keep guns out of the hands of criminals and out of the hands of those who might be mentally ill, we can at least reduce the number of gun deaths that we have in this country. In 2013, we had 11,000 people that lost their lives because of guns. We have to come to the point where we have to understand that as a country, there is something that can be done. And I hope that this at least spurs an additional debate where Republicans will now understand that they're going to have to heed the calls of the majority of the American people as opposed to RA and do something that makes sense to keep our people safe.
Lisa, what about that? The president, the vice president, many in Congress, many Democrats in Congress tried this hard push after Sandy Hook, but it didn't get anywhere, not even background checks, which are the numbers I remember, roughly 87% of people supported.
Yep.
Why can't this get through?
Well, Victor, according to recent Pew Research, the majority of Americans actually, don't support increased gun laws. And, we've got a lot of Americans that have, practice their Second Amendment rights here. But look, the common sense gun reforms that Maria talked about that did not pass Congress would not have done anything to have prevented this tragedy. And it is a tragedy. And that's absolutely where the focus should be, that this is horrible tragedy, that this act was committed by a murderous monster, and that's where the focus should be. But those common sense reforms that Maria mentioned wouldn't have prevented this. This guy did not use an assault weapon. He did not use a multiple capacity magazine. He used a handgun. And if you look at the incident of the Sandy Hook incident as well, that guy failed to pass a background check, and he ended up stealing his mother's legally obtained guns. So with these common sense, these so-called common sense reforms that Democrats often mention, really failed to actually, prevent a lot of these incidents from happening.
Well, let's talk about tone, and that can, it plays a major role in the way that the national discourse proceeds, not only among 2016 candidates, but also around dinner tables across the country. We heard from Secretary Clinton, former Secretary Clinton, when she was asked about how this can be stopped, and she said that often the public discourse is hotter than it should be, and it can trigger people who are less than stable to do something that we've seen. And then she went on to say this, that, let's put it up on the screen. She says that I think decent people need to stand up against it. We have to speak out against it. Like, for example, a recent entry into the Republican presidential campaign said some very inflammatory things about Mexicans. Everybody should stand up and say that's not acceptable. We heard from Donald Trump when he entered the race saying that Mexico, they send over rapists and criminals. Maria, is that fair, or is she playing politics with a national tragedy?
No, I think that she's absolutely right. And I think what has been absolutely missing in this discourse, Victor, in terms of what Hillary Clinton said, is that when folks on the far right talk about incendiary comments like the ones that Donald Trump made, no one in their own party or with their own political philosophy stands up to them to say that's wrong. And it's not just Donald Trump. There have been an array of Republicans and far right-wing extremists who have talked awful things about immigrants in this country and about other constituencies in this country, and no one on their side stands up to say that is not the kind of civil discourse that we need here.
All right, we've got 30.
It's one of the reasons
that's absolutely
why
that is absolutely ridiculous. The reality is
not have the majority of the
Maria, that is
Hispanic vote in this
absolutely
country.
ridiculous.
Last 30 seconds to you, Lisa.
No, the reality is that hate exists in Americans, and it's wrong. And if anything, it is incredibly saddening that politicians are already turning to gun control and trying to make this a political issue. If anything, what we should be doing as Americans is actually following in the footsteps of the victims of the family who in court the other day told the killer that they forgive him. They showed an incredible amount of faith and compassion, and that is where the national dialogue of this country should be right now. It should be about healing. It should be about coming together as a nation. And if the victims of the families, if the families of the victims are able to forgive, if they're able to show compassion, if they're able to show that kind of resolve, then the rest of the country should as well. And Victor, I know you mentioned vigils that are being held across the country. If anything, we should be looking at the uniting that is happening in this country. And Maria, that is shameful to make this a partisan political issue.
We've got to wrap it there, but let me say both to Lisa and to Maria that the question they were asked, if they had something to say specifically on behalf of their relatives, the judge didn't ask if they had any comments about gun control, and maybe they would have shared that as well.
I agree.
Lisa, Maria,
Lisa
and Maria, thank you very much. Of course, this conversation could go on. We'll do it again. Next hour of Your New Day starts after.